We are now live. All right. Well, welcome, Erica. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about your little book, Flutie's Family Reunion. For me, this is a special uh, time and live stream because I just finished being at the 52nd annual National Flute Association convention. And so seeing your little book is kind of like being at the convention for me. So, I guess the reason I wanted to bring you on specifically in the Flutarians group with this book is because in my experience, just playing a little bit of different flutes other than the concert flute has
Mhm.
improved my improvising because there might be different scales or different techniques that you need to use, and so it's made it possible for me to be more flexible in my own improvising. So I would just love to hear basically to start the origin story. So what inspired you to make Flutie's Family Reunion?
Yeah, and thank you, yes, for having me on. Yes, and I'm super impressed that you're doing this today after all that that stuff at NFA. That's amazing. That's quite a bunch of stuff you're doing right there at one time. Yeah, and next year I hope to go actually because I wasn't able to attend this year. So maybe I can see you or some other flutarians in the future. This book was actually inspired. Well, I kind of started to get the idea of this actually a few years back, because when yeah, I guess it was almost maybe 5 years ago now that I started teaching a 5-year-old flutist. Yeah, that's right. She just turned 10, so it's been 5 years. My goodness.
Okay.
And at that point, it was the youngest flutist I had ever taught. And I mean, I had worked with younger flutists, but not five. And I realized like just how awesome, just how wonderful it was to work with younger flute players. And it's really cool because like there's like this new flutes out there now that you couldn't have done this like when I first started learning flute. I started learning flute when I was in fifth grade, and fifth grade band. But that was fourth or fifth grade. That was kind of the normal starting time, which still is for most people. But you can now actually start earlier because they have like little flutes out now, like I don't know if you've ever seen them before, but like the little um, the fifes or the little toots or the J flutes, like these little cute little plastic flutes,
Hmm.
and they're really nice. You can actually start learning the flute almost like at any age. I taught a class one time, a group class. I had to like all the way from like as young as 4. So it's amazing, and I just discovered this whole new world of stuff that you could do with young flute players. And so we started, we played games and and we read books. And so I don't know if you can see it back there. I have my little flute library,
I see your
and
flute family back there. Yeah.
and my flute family. Yeah, so
Oh,
so I've
your
got my
library. Yeah, I see it too behind the contrabass.
right. Yeah, I've got my whole flute herd over here. I've got like 11 flutes set up for us today, if if you wanted
Cool.
to see them. But yeah, behind there, I actually have my little library that I started making it because when I was having lessons with this student, I would also teach her sister on piano a little bit too. And I mostly teach flute, but I did a little bit of piano with her. And so she was just sitting there, like, just waiting. And I'm like, well, maybe she should she should have something really nice to do, something fun and educational. So I started looking at these flute books, and they're really, I have a lot of nice ones, which I think are they're all really cute and really really fun. But most of them either have like like they go on some kind of adventure, like a flutist or a flute player, or flute itself goes on some kind of adventure and it has like a moral to the story, or it's like introducing the flute along with like other instruments in the band or the orchestra or something like that. But there wasn't really anything for flute, just flute, just talking about the flute family. And I think sometimes people don't realize just how big the flute family actually is. So we think of the flute, we think of our concert flute, right? But there's obviously a whole lot more. So even in the concert flute family, there's you've got piccolo, right, little one all the way down to the big contrabass over there, and sometimes even more. I don't know if you saw that double contrabass that was supposed to be at the NFA convention. I wanted to see that one.
I played it. Yeah.
You saw it? Yeah.
Mhm.
I just really wanted to blow on that thing. That seemed amazing. So yeah, so even in the concert flute family, there's a lot of instruments. But then of course you have historical and world instruments too, right? And so and the flute is, I think it's the biggest family of all of the woodwinds, and plus it's like one of the oldest instruments in the world. And I mean the all the like 40,000 year old flute, I think is like this instrument ever found. So we
Wow,
obviously in every
yeah.
culture, every culture has a flute, and so I sometimes um, I'm almost made to feel guilty by some other people who don't mean to do it, but they're like, you just play flute? I mean, yeah, I tinker around in other instruments. I've got a cello back there, but you don't want me to play that for you. I don't sound particularly great on that. So there's a few instruments I tinker around on. I do a little piano and some other things, but mostly I'm a flute player. And they're like, you just teach flute, right? And I'm like, yeah, but that's, you don't realize it's such a big family. It's not just flute. So I don't think there's any shame in being just a flute player, because man, that's enough to keep you busy for a very, very long time. Like I
Sure.
still get, like, almost every few months I keep learning another instrument in the flute family, just because it's massive. And so like my latest one for the book, I have shakuhachi in there, and that was one I had always wanted to learn, and so I I taught myself some shakuhachi for that, and it was really interesting. Yeah, so anyway, but that was one of my main things for the book, though, was just to kind of show people, like, it's not just a flute. We've got we've got all of this. And I think especially the younger students, I mean, they don't know. And it was one of my hopes to get some people who are younger to actually like want to be flute players and get interested in playing, because they can start playing now. Although actually you don't have to just be a young flute player to read the book. I think I had some of my other older students, my adult students, read it, and they thought it was fun. So it's for the young flutist, or the young at heart flutist. Um, yeah. So did I answer your question?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, there's so
Okay.
much potentially to talk about, but let me give you guys on the screen just the briefest tour of the book. Now, compared to some of the other author highlights that I'll be doing later on in the coming months, this is not serious reading or like grown-up literature. It's more for me personally something that I can put on my coffee table, and when people come over who don't really know about my life as a musician, I can, when I say I play flute, they can take a quick look at this and see, well, let's see. This is probably my favorite picture in the flute, the one in the book of the contrabass flute, big granddaddy flute, and in the back you've got a tour of the different types of flutes, just a little bit of basic information. And at the very beginning of the book, you even have the QR code. Let me grab it. Trying to move my pages here. There's a QR code on the second page where if you guys scan this and access the digital copy and the playlist, you can actually hear what each of these flutes sound like. Just a short little song, short little sample. And so I thought that would be great for me to have just for a conversation starter, because like you said, most I could think most people out in the general world, when you say I play the flute, they think of one flute, and
Mhm.
they don't realize that there's 11 plus different kinds of flutes. I had the opportunity to travel to Mexico some with my family in my life, and I remember being well, I guess a preteen, and I would say to in Mexico, oh, I'm playing the flute, and sometimes they would not know if I meant maybe the panpipe style flute, maybe an Andean style flute, or a recorder or an ocarina. So those are all mentioned here in your book, and well, so last year was my first time to visit the National Flute Association convention, and one of the, I guess, most powerful or most surprising aspects of being at the convention was the sheer number of contrabass flutes there. Because I'd seen them before. I'd traveled to the Texas Music Educators Association convention, and they had a few of them um in the exhibit hall there. But to actually see gosh, there were probably more than 100 contrabass flutes there, more than 100
Mm.
people there actually playing this instrument, and sometimes more than 10 of them at a time. I got to catch a little bit of the low flutes choir, which would be alto flute, bass flute, and contrabass flute as well. And well, I just wanted to be able to share a little piece of that experience with people who aren't in the flute world.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, and yeah, my contrabass, that's my new baby. I got it in like the beginning of this year. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's so much fun. But I actually, if you want me to, I can share my screen. I don't know if that's possible, but
Yeah,
I
please.
have I could show you a little bit of the digital book just so people know what it looks like, and maybe play a recording or something if you want.
Sure. You go ahead
Okay.
and try for that. Make sure we can
Let's
see it
see.
okay.
I need to share my sound too, right? Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so of course you get the physical book, but if you want just the digital one, or which the physical one has a link to the digital book as well. But basically it just looks like, and you can make this full screen, but actually I probably should make it full screen. Let's see, get this little box out of the way here. Okay, yeah, so um, basically, yeah. So what I've done is that, so for some parts of the book, you can actually hear each of the instruments being played. And so anytime you see that little symbol, and there's this little plus sign right there, you can actually click it and listen to the recording. So for example, let me skip over here. Um, so like if you wanted to hear flutie, right? So this is the one that actually introduces the regular concert flute. So you can actually go here and it takes you to recording right there.
Great.
Yeah, so there you go, and then that's for all of them. All the instruments go through like that. So those were
Mhm.
all little original. Oops, hold on, I just lost you. Oh, there we go. Okay, so those are all original little tunes that I wrote for each of the different instruments, and then at the end there's this big finale, this concert where all the flutes, all the concert flutes come together and give a performance. So it's a flute choir for piccolo all the way through contrabass.
Yeah, I was curious, how did you choose the music to play for your, well, I guess for each of the pieces, little excerpts.
Yeah, well, so I wrote the flute choir piece first. And then
Cool.
I wanted to, it's basically a showcase concert. Basically what I do for that piece, it's like so I show the flute and the alto and the bass and the contrabass and the piccolo, right? So then I've got each one like having their own little solo. And then at the end, all the melodies are put together, and you hear it all is one big one big ensemble and everything. Yeah. So then from then the book, I just put like each of the solos that's going to be found in that piece is you're going to hear them individually for each of the instruments.
So, okay, that's wow. So you composed the music too, and I guess the little excerpts for each instrument. Well, each of the concert flute family instruments was inspired by the flute choir sort of piece that you started with, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's actually one of the things I really loved about doing this project is because I get to combine my different passions together. Because obviously I'm a flute player,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
but I also majored in composition for my undergrad, and I love I love writing. I don't always get a time to do as much of it as I like. So when I get a chance to actually compose, it's really nice, and I like, especially for flute choir. Actually, just like this last weekend, I just finished another piece for flute choir. So it's just like one of my favorite things to do. And then also when I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer, and I kind of gave that up. Like, like, oh, I'm going to major in music and do all this stuff. I'm like, wait a minute, I can still do that too. You can kind of combine all that stuff together. So it was really a lot of fun to do this. Oh, and I have a sequel in mind already too. So
Oh, good. I was wondering.
yeah.
I gosh, I have two questions in mind. I'll see if I can keep the second one in my brain. Um, so I guess you composed a couple of little ditties for the ocarina, shakuhachi, and the Irish flutes as well.
Well, so the Irish tunes were actually actual folk tunes, that from Ireland that I played. It was Foggy Dew and Drowsy Maggie because they're my favorite. I love those. Um, but the other ones, yeah, I just kind of came up with my own tunes for those. And I
Cool.
didn't write those out for that they're not in the big like flute choir showcase at the end because they're just kind of that was for a flute choir. That was that. But
Hmm.
then I showed some of the other individual instruments, and they all have their own little tune you can listen to also.
Yeah. And I guess my other question that was starting to percolate or bubble up was, well, there's a lot of people who say I want to publish a book and then it never happens. So I'm curious, was there one little thing or moment or day that made it happen? Like what was the moment of ignition, or what actually made it come to fruition this year?
Yeah, well, so first of all, just the idea. I remember like no, I was telling you, I was like I started collecting these books and stuff from like 5 years ago, starting like 5 years ago. But the actual idea happened like beginning of last year, I think. Well, maybe it was like April or May or something like that. But I just remember walking past the library and I was like, I don't know, something about it, I was like, wait, ding. uh, yeah, and then and it took me a few weeks before I actually started doing anything with it. My biggest concern was actually like the art part because um, the extent of my art ability is like I can draw like little stick figures, and I can draw cats for some reason. That's the only thing I can draw. But other than that, like you don't want to see my drawing. So, yeah, and so I was like, that was my biggest issue first. Is like, what should I do with that? But I actually had a fellow musician friend who's actually a singer, but she was originally an art major, or no, I mean, she was an artist, I should say, because she was an artist, and then later she went back to school to do music. But yeah, but she was busy, so she actually introduced me to her daughter, who is actually in engineering, but is an amazing artist at the same time. So yeah, and I just got lucked out to find like yeah. I just think the illustrations are just adorable. Um, so yeah, and so I got lucked out to find somebody who was really really good and was very on top of things and actually she was like faster than I was getting things done. So
That's
and,
nice.
yeah, so yeah, then I was just when I felt like I had my bearings, then I just felt like I could go for it. Yeah, so then I finished it about January or February of this year, and then it took a few weeks of the little nitty gritty detailed stuff, like ISBN
Sure.
numbers and copyright and whatever, all that stuff, so, which is it was a learning process in itself, right there. That was interesting. Um, not as fun as actually doing the actual project itself, but it was definitely interesting. Yeah, but then I got it all finished and everything pretty much by April this year. So yeah, it was a fun project, and I'm ready to do more because I definitely have a another one in mind, and maybe in a few months I will have something else out. So,
Well, keep us in the loop.
yeah, I will let you know. Yeah, but I already have the story and everything, so I will get it out hopefully in a little bit. So
So, for those of you flutists who have been considering maybe going to something like the National Flute Association convention, one of the things that was, I don't know if it was unexpected for me, but it was kind of like a pleasant surprise, is that there were lots of different flutes there that weren't just the Boehm style flute. Now, Boehm style, gosh, I'm not sure if I can get my history or pronunciation right here, but when we play a concert flute, even, well, the piccolos, the contrabasses, the bass flutes, even I think most clarinets, no, maybe not clarinets. What am I thinking of? Saxophones. That's a similar sort of Boehm style fingering system that makes it very easy comparatively to play a chromatic scale.
mm,
But at the convention, especially in the exhibit hall, You'll see different types of recorders. You'll see, in a minute, I'd love to see up close and personal the DZ. You might see some of those. You might see Native American flutes or ocarinas or shakuhachi flutes. And um, well, I would love to hear first, like what were your first flutes that you branched out on, and what are maybe a few of your key takeaways that you've taken from playing those into your concert flute playing? Like for
Mm.
me, when the first couple of times I picked up a Bansuri style flute and played a wooden flute that didn't have any keys that you press down, you just use the pads of your fingers to cover it, I realized, oh, I really need to focus on making sure that hole is completely covered with my fingers, or else it's gonna sound like a different note, or it's not gonna make the sound that I want. And also, if you want to make a chromatic scale on those, you have to halfway uncover or partially uncover um the notes. And so when I go from playing like a six hole style wooden flute to playing my concert flute, it's like, wow, I'm so grateful. It's so easy for me to change keys. Also, there's certain mechanisms on there, I guess like the split E, that make it easy to go up into the upper register, and um, it just feels like a luxury. So I'm curious, which flutes did you branch out to first, and what were some of the things that you learned about flute playing in general just from experimenting?
Yeah, yeah. So like I was saying, I started with the regular concert flute all the way back in fifth grade band, but then just talking about, but actually before the world instruments, like my first instrument after flute was actually piccolo, which I started in high school, and then later I did like alto and bass in college, and then my most recent thing is the contrabass. But the actual like world instruments though, I started collecting when I was in high school. So my first one was a Native American flute, and I still have it back there. Wait a minute, can you see
Okay,
it? Um,
can't see which
right,
one it is
right
there.
over there. So,
Oh,
on
up
that shelf
top,
right
yeah,
there.
I see it.
Yeah. So yeah, so I still have it, and it's just I think it's just so much fun. It's like all these instruments that I just bought just for fun. At the time I was just I wasn't gonna do anything with it. I was just doing it for fun, and now it's like I get to make use of them all the time. But I did Native American flute first, and then I think it was the tin whistle that came next, the Irish whistle, and yeah, so that's that's one of my personal favorites. It's so much fun. And then the Dita. So that was all kind of around nearish the same time. I think the Dita was probably the latest one, but then from there, I'm a little obsessive, like I have to get all these. Every time I see a new flute, I'm like, oh, I have to play that. So and that's why every few months I keep learning a new instrument. It's just because it's like, ooh, there's a good one, and I have to keep going. Like, recently I joined a medieval group, so I'm doing like some like medieval recorder, and and I've got like the Brook flute and all that stuff too. But then the world instruments, yeah, I've got a bunch, and I've got some new ones that I'm gonna be putting in for my next book too. So yeah, but yeah, I love playing world instruments. First of all, because like the style, like if you really want to like learn how to play Irish music, yeah, you could. Yeah, actually, that's not the greatest example because sometimes Irish music they do use the regular concert flute. But if you really want to learn, like, okay, say like Chinese music or something, play the dita. Like it'll make a difference in like you'll know the kind of sound that you're going for, the timbre, the color of the sound, the kind of scales and stuff that are used because all the instruments have their own kind of well, there's no keys. There's usually just like a built-in scale, and so you will the kind of scales that whether it's like major, minor, or pentatonic or something like that, or any other kind of variation. Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that I think is great. Talking about improvising. I think a world instrument is a great instrument to improvise on. First of all, because it just gets you away from your regular concert flute, and sometimes you're so like trained and with your concert flute that you're like you can't do anything else than what you normally
Right.
want to do. So I think learning another instrument is a great way to kind of everything's new. So if you sound terrible, well, you're going to sound terrible anyway when you first start because you know it's a new instrument.
Sure.
So you might as well sound terrible with a new style too. And you know, and yeah, so it's just I think it's a lot easier to improvise on, and also because usually they're just based in one scale. You know, with
That's
their
what I was
flute, I
just
think it's
thinking.
great that you have all, you know, you can play all 12 notes equally and the, you know, the chromatic and stuff. But then it's again, it's like, well, you have all those options, all right? It's like, how
Sure.
do you narrow it down? But if your flute is tuned in G major, you're going to be playing something in G major, you know, and you really can't play it wrong because there's only one scale on there. So no matter what you do, you're going to be in the right key, you know, and it's
Hmm.
not going to sound bad. That's one of my favorite parts of it. I think it's just that it's just the kind of the freedom that you feel when you start to play the instrument.
Hmm. I was just telling some flute friends yesterday, oh well, if you're improvising, you have a 3 out of 7 or a 4 out of 7 chance of playing a chord tone or a right note. And Yvette said, oh, but 12 notes. But now that we're talking about this, I think about having a recorder or a penny whistle in my hand, and that plays a major scale, 7 notes, 7 tones in the scale. And so you'd have to try really hard to play something that was a wrong note there. Or if it sounds a little wrong, just go down or up, and you're on one of the chord tones. Um, I guess I was saying Dita incorrectly, but would you mind grabbing it for us? And
Sure, sure.
one of the things that I liked hearing in the example recording of this instrument is that this instrument has a unique, almost like a buzzing, vibrating sound that comes from the
Yeah.
paper membrane, right?
Yeah, it's one of the I think most unique flutes. Of course, there's a lot of unique flutes out there, but what's really unique about this one, so you can see, yeah, it's all open holes, right? And so this is where
Hmm.
you blow into, but right here,
I
and
can
it's,
see
it's
it,
a
yeah.
little fuzzier because yeah, there's actually that little membrane that goes across. So it's actually like the one of the only like flute reed instruments. Yes. So now we're with the clarinets and everything, right? We got reeds to deal with, and that was interesting trying to put a reed on there for the first time. That was a hard thing in itself, right there.
And you
I
mean
mean, the
reed
process
as
is
in specifically like the plant, a reed, right?
right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not like the big fat ones like clarinet or something
Hmm.
has, but it's like a little really thin piece of membrane right there. Yeah, yeah, and it's really easy to damage. So if you just just the wrong way, and then suddenly you're not sounding like a pizza anymore. It doesn't sound great. But yeah, it's really cool because it has this really vibrant sound to it. It's this really let's use the word like nasally, but it's not in a bad way. But it's got that extra color in there that sometimes like flutes without a reed have. They're a little bit more hollow sounding.
Mm. Sure. Well, give us a demo if
Yeah.
you like. Make sure that your original sound for musicians is clicked on so we can hear you.
Did I do that
We'll see
already?
if it's working properly this week. It was giving me some
Yeah.
trouble last Tuesday.
Okay. You can hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. Isn't that
Nice.
cool?
It's so cool. I listen to that sound and my brain goes, why is that familiar? And what I'm hearing is the combination of like kazoo sound and like wooden flute sound. Because,
You're not the first person to tell me that.
well, if you think about the physics of what's going on in a kazoo and in a ditsa, it's kind of the same, except that on when it's a kazoo, it's our voice that's creating the vibration for that little membrane to that little piece of
Right.
paper to bounce up and down. And on this, it's the well, I guess it's the resonance of you splitting the air across the tone hole and according to how your fingers are. Um,
Right.
as I was reflecting on the different types of flutes, I was thinking that one of the reasons that you could say that instruments like the recorder, the ocarina, and the penny whistle or the tin whistle are easier to play is because the way the instrument is built, there's the air is already split for us. But when
The
we
little
play,
fipple, right?
uh-huh, yeah, I guess it's called a fipple.
I
I'm
think,
not.
yeah.
It's gosh, I don't have one here. Why don't you maybe grab one of those and you can point it out to us.
Sure.
So when we play um any sort of flutes where we blow across the hole, we're creating the sound by blowing, well, lots of, it's like blowing white noise frequencies across the tone hole, and we angle our air down there, and it kind of cuts the airstream. But show us up close the fipple part, and when you see the, maybe point to the hole where the air comes out. I guess we can't see it real well on that one because it's dark, but
Yeah, right. So right there, right. You blow into, and it goes in there, and then it comes out. Um,
there we
yeah,
go.
right.
Yeah, we can see it a little. Yeah, I can see it now.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I do have a one that's actually made out of tin. This one just sounds a little better. It's made out of wood, so I
Yeah.
usually play this one. But yeah, and so this one's also in major scale. Right? So it's no matter what you play on that, it's going to sound, it's in a major scale. It's going to sound pretty good, and it's a lot of fun, And I love playing Irish tunes, so yeah.
One of the things I like about the penny whistle or similar instruments is that it doesn't have this notion where with classical style flutes, there's this notion that you have to play it well. But the penny whistle is kind of more of just like a cultural instrument that it's so small and easy to carry around. People bring it to parties, bring it to dances,
Mm.
and there's not this expectation that you have to play like Rampal or Galway or something.
Yeah, I mean, usually they play dances,
Hmm.
So I mean, Irish flutes do also, but I think
Sure.
especially the Irish whistle, it's just a fast, happy, fun, fun thing. So yeah, and it's it's fun, and it's great, and you can really be flashy and show off and stuff. But you're right, there's no pressure. I think, at least to me, it feels a little less there's a little less pressure just because like what you're saying, it's not like you have to be you have to have this beautiful pure tone and everything's perfectly in tune. Actually, sometimes you can do like note bends and things like right, you can kind of do those kind of things in there too. And so
Hmm.
that actually kind of adds to the music is these special effects and things that aren't what we usually call like your traditional kind of playing.
Yeah, I look forward to having some time in my life where I explore Irish the styles a little bit more.
Yeah,
There's some vocabulary that I'm not well versed in. It's like the little trills and the turns and
right,
um,
cuts and strikes and all that
yeah,
kind of
there
stuff.
you go.
Yeah.
Maybe you can teach us a little bit one of these days. We'll have a little Irish flute highlight.
Yeah, yeah, sure. It's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite things to do.
I'm curious if anything else comes to mind as far as um, like benefits that you've experienced. What benefits have you experienced on your concert flute that have come from exploring other style flutes, maybe the bass flutes, or I don't know.
Oh, yeah. You mean so you mean the other concert flutes instead of the wind
Any in
instruments?
general.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I like for exploring the other concert instruments. So like I was saying with like the world instruments, like style and color and kind of the freedom. But like with the concert flutes, I find it makes when I play another one of those in a different, which is in a different range, it makes my flute playing like a lot easier. Like if I want to play low notes on my flute, well, if I, sometimes you're trying to get that like, oh, the low C, it's so low, right? And it's like trying to get that note out. But then you go and you play an alto or bass flute or man, or even a contrabass flute, and then you go back and you try to play that low C on the regular flute. You're like, oh, that's not that low. That's not that the finger stretch isn't that far. It's really not as bad as you thought. So that's what I do sometimes with some of my students that are struggling with like, oh, I just cannot get my pinky down there. My ear's just not going there. I'm like, here, try an alto flute, or and then you go back. It's like, yeah, you're right. It's a lot easier. And then piccolo,
Mhm.
if you can play piccolo up high, playing high notes on flute, not that bad. Right.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point.
yeah, that's I mean a useful thing for playing. I mean, of course, it's just useful, or I should say useful, but it's great in itself to play these other instruments, just because I mean, they're wonderful instruments in their own right. You know,
Mhm.
when we say, oh, all this is to benefit the other flute. Well, it's like, well, I mean, they're great instruments by themselves. There's no one flute that's better than another. Of course, we just have the one that's most popular, which is our regular concert flute. But but yeah, I think they're all just really. fun to play. Just you get the different timbres, the different ranges, and they just have different feelings. Even trying to play a contrabass flute, it's just like I get so mellow so quickly playing
Mhm.
contrabass. It's like
I was I was so pleased yesterday that when I stepped on this little stool in order to be able to play the double contrabass flute, that I was actually able to, with ease, get out the low D, which the lowest
right.
note that instrument plays is a low C, which for context is the lowest C on a piano. Um,
Wow,
yeah,
that's awesome.
and I was just so grateful that I guess I was able to have my embouchure loose enough or big enough, the aperture big enough to get those low notes out. Because the first few times that I played bass flutes in high school flute choirs, I couldn't play the low notes at all. I just
Mhm.
wasn't conditioned to it. But I purchased a bass flute about a year ago, and
Yay.
thanks. And it was really for two reasons for me. One was actually to play in sound healing context because the
Hmm.
bass flute it's kind of like a cello, the vibrations from it. There's something healing about those low notes.
Oh, I am right there with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And two, even though I've gotten pretty good at honking out those low C's on my concert flute, I know that practicing the bass flute, even just a few minutes a week, will will help me build and maintain a strong low embouchure for my concert flute.
Hmm. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean that's yeah, right. Because I was talking about like the air. I mean that yeah the embouchure being relaxed with the embouchure. Exactly, that would definitely help with all the air and stuff and getting low notes out in the flute. Yeah, it's it's great. There's just so many benefits to playing other flutes, and then plus it's just
And
fun.
I was telling somebody about trying to play the low C on my bass flute and said, "Well, you can't really work hard at it because if you work hard at it, then your muscles will get tense, and then when your muscles are tense, it's impossible to get those low notes.
Yeah, and then you
So
get
it's kind of a
frustrated, right? And
meditation." Yeah.
gets worse. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, would you like to show us a little bit of the contrabass flute?
Sure.
I'm
Sure.
curious if when you bring it close to the camera, if we'll be able to hear. I'd like to hear just some of the clicks, the just pop those
Yeah.
notes down.
You might
Um,
not be able to see the top half of the flute. Let me.
I'm not sure if we'll be able to see your head.
Okay, let's see. If I come over here. Here, let me aim my camera up a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Is that better? Can you see me?
Yeah, I could see you.
Okay. Here, I can play the little solo from the book.
Sure, that sounds good.
And this contrabass is fun because it goes down to low B.
Oh, I
Yeah.
was wondering if they make some that go down to a low B. That's
Yeah, yeah, and I wasn't actually expecting it when I was going to get the contrabass originally, but it was a nice bonus because it's fun. You can feel the ground kind of vibrate a little bit when you get way down there.
Wow, well, nice playing. Congratulations on being able to play those low notes first thing in the morning, basically,
Yeah.
without a warm up.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely took me a few weeks to get used to playing this thing, but now I think it's I wouldn't say it's 100% perfect all the time, but I think that you kind of get used to the embouchure and everything. So just like any of the other instruments.
I play saxophone a little bit. I have a soprano sax, and I used to play alto sax for one semester. And sometimes when I pick up the soprano sax, I feel like it it's just because the instrument is bigger than the flute physically,
Mm-hmm.
it's not as fast.
Mm.
So, um, actually, I got to premiere a piece of music, a quartet that included bass flute this week, and when the
Nice.
composer sent it to me and I started reading the tempo markings, I'm like, oh no, this is fast. How am I gonna play this on the bass flute? I
Yeah.
mean, my fingers are pretty fast on the concert flute, but um don't you agree that it's
Yeah,
like it just takes longer to get the note to come out, like a
yeah, it's not
millisecond
really the
longer or something?
exactly. It's not really so much the fingers. It's like just that response, especially when you're in the low register. It's like you blow, and then like half a second later the note comes out. Yeah, and apparently that's a common problem with like tuba players, and and we have to kind of get in their mindset where they're always actually playing slightly ahead of the beat, just so when their note actually finally speaks, they're on time.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I was thinking about
hard.
that when I was trying to play this fast piece of music with lots of rhythmic changes in it.
Right.
It was tough. Oh gosh, what else was I gonna say? Oh, one of the things that has changed for me personally as I have matured as a musician and as a flute player is that when I was in high school, if you had asked me to sing to you the tuba part or the bass part, I may or may not have been able to do it. But now I've gotten better at actually being able to hear what's going on in the bass. I think a lot of flute players or people who are sopranos or play instruments that are high, they just never really hear the low notes. But I think that's probably one of the benefits of playing
Yeah.
low flutes just a little bit is getting a context for what is the bass actually doing in the music.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't even when you mentioned that, I didn't even think of that. But yeah, that's a really great point to knowing the bass line and the harmonies and
Hmm.
getting perspective of what else actually happens. Of course, we love playing the melody as flute players, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, just knowing like everything else is important too. Although when I write my pieces, I try to give every instrument the melody at least one point, or at least something interesting to play rather than just long notes or whatever.
Not just like a million rests and like one note at the end.
Exactly. Yeah. So I try to be nice to the player, having played pieces where that's basically what I'm doing. Like, oh, so
Yeah,
it,
I
it
appreciate that.
yeah.
Maybe we can premiere your new flute choir piece at a conference next year.
Yeah. Well, that's because the next conference is in Georgia, and I live in Georgia,
Oh, I
so
forgot.
I'm so excited. And I know for you, and it was in Texas. I mean, how
Ah,
great is that?
so grateful it was on my home territory. I got to sleep in my own bed.
No, there you go. Fantastic. One isn't quite that close. I still have to travel, but
Okay.
it's within driving distance, which is great. But our local flute choir here, we are going to be applying to play, the theme of the concert of the convention is unity and universal oneness, which is, I mean, it's really cool. But like when you apply, you have to pick out pieces that fit the theme, and I'm like, okay, that's a really cool theme, but like, what pieces do you play to to fit that? So I've got some pieces and stuff, but then I also like wrote one for that because I was like, I wanted something to talk about unity, and I really couldn't find. I mean, there are other pieces, but nothing that I could really find to fit exactly everything that I wanted to. So that's what I did for our number there. So I might actually be playing it at the convention next year if we get approved. Hopefully, we'll
Yeah.
find out.
So you wrote that the piece that you just finished, you wrote it with the idea of unity and oneness in mind. I,
Right,
I'm
exactly.
curious. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, but I'm curious. Like, what was the little kernel or seed of inspiration that got the notes flowing on the page?
Yeah, well, so it's actually kind of it's interesting because it's not exactly what you would think of when you took originally when you're thinking, oh, do Unity or something. But it's actually, are you a Tolkien fan? Lord of the Rings, Hobbit?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Have you ever read the book The Silmarillion?
Mm. I attempted to when I was in high school. Y'all,
Yeah.
this book that she's talking about is like this big.
Right.
So, no, I have not read it, but I read a little
Okay.
bit of it.
Well, the most important chapter is actually the very first one, at
Okay,
least
well,
in my
maybe I read
opinion.
that one.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the coolest story because, and if you're not aware, the Silmarillion is basically about the mythology that goes behind all of the stuff in Lord of the Rings and Hobbit and stuff. And the Silmarillion is basically the beginning part of it. It's like a creation story. And what's
Mm,
really cool about it is that this creator, and then he has like other creations that help him create things too. It helps create Earth, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but basically what happens is that they create through music, and and
mm.
so they like sing songs and play music to like create things, and there's this one there's this one, his name is Melkor. So he's like he gets this idea of like, I don't want to do what everybody else is doing, and he turns out to be the big bad guy later.
Mm.
But he wants to like create his own thoughts and go against everybody else and make his own creations and whatnot. And so he gets really like dissonant and nasty, harmony and stuff going in there trying to go against it. But then they blend their music with his, and it just makes it even stronger and more beautiful. So it started off with a nice
Wow.
theme, and then it gets even more and more beautiful. As he tries to make it worse, it gets even more and more beautiful. And so I just thought it was a great thing for like talking about unity, like because it's like all these contrasts and things that we think are like bad in our life sometimes actually turn out to be good things. If you ever think about actually sometimes like, you go back like you know sometimes even years later and you look back and you're like it was terrible during when I lived it, but it's like, oh, it actually ended up being a really, really good thing. And I can think of many times when something like that has happened in my life. So sometimes things like that, or just knowing like that we can have lots of contrast. So that's what the rest of our program would be about, is like contrast, like how good things come, like we have like a fire, but the phoenix rises from the fire, or we have rain, and but yet we have like rainbows, and so it's like that's what the rest of our program would be about. It's like even though bad things might happen, we can have a good result that comes from it, and all these different contrasts can actually add up together to make a beautiful whole. So so I took that, and so I used that story, but and made it for flute choir, which it was fun because I got to write some contra bass stuff for it. So,
Wow.
so,
That
yeah.
well, that's a beautiful just explanation and story. I'll be curious to hear it one of these days.
Yeah, so our flute choir rehearsals start this week. So I'll work out the kinks and whatnot, but hopefully we'll record it because we have to make recordings for the NFA. So hopefully we'll record it in the next couple of months, and then yeah, and then it'll be ready hopefully.
Cool. Well, I think you mentioned before that you've got some flute lessons or music teaching happening coming up in the next half an hour or so. Is there any other things you might like to show us or tell us before you move on with your day?
Hmm. Well, you had so many good questions. Like, you kind of hit everything plus more that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, but if anybody ever has questions or they want to contact me about the book or any of these instruments or anything else, I mean, whatever, I am always open. I don't know if I can like I've got my website or I've got my email that I could share. I don't know if you want to like put it in your Facebook group or if I could just put it there. I guess I could just tell it here too if you want
Yeah,
to.
both.
Okay, so my website is skyflutemusic.com. That's SKYE flutemusic.com, and the book is on there, as well as and there's a contact. Actually, that's actually probably the best way to contact me. There's actually a button on there that says just contact, and then you can just email me right there if you need to. Yeah, and then I also have other flute resources on there too. I've got like a blog and stuff that I put with different like flute playing tips and stuff like that on there. So, but yeah, but I'm always open to meeting other flute players.
Cool. Yeah, check out her website. Join the mailing list every once in a while. You'll get a freebie. I think the email that inspired me to actually schedule this interview was something like why you should be playing more flutes. And I was like, you know what? Erica's right. We need to talk about this where people in my group can hear about it because
Yep.
it will improve your flute playing, it will improve your musicianship, and it's just plain fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Talking about all this, I forgot. Yes, I did write a blog article about that. So if you want more information, like I do have a blog article. Yeah, why? I think that's what I called it. Like why you should be playing more flutes or something like that. But it's in there if you want to read it. So
Cool. Well,
yeah, thank you so much, Vic.
one more time, the vision of the front, Flutie's family reunion. If you've never been to a flute festival, I highly suggest that you
Mm-hmm.
attend even just a local one because you'll get the
Yeah.
chance to play some of these flutes if you haven't before, get the chance to be around, have the camaraderie of other musicians and maybe get some teaching from some master teachers.
Yeah, it's great. And if you're coming to the convention, the National Flute Convention next year, I hope to meet you in person.
Hmm. I decided on my drive home from the convention that next year I need to specifically make a Flutarians meetup. So
Hey,
y'all
there you go.
look for that. I'll keep you in the loop. I'll make sure to post it in the group. And well, thanks so
That would be
much,
awesome.
Erica.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, have a great rest of your day, and bye to everyone in the group, and have a good day, y'all.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.